At 2:41 local time, the night over western Russia was quiet. Too quiet. A light fog hung low over the tree line, softening the outlines of a secluded estate reserved for Russia's highest-ranking visitors. Officially, it wasn't a palace. It wasn't even listed as a strategic site. On paper, it was just a state guest residence. Unofficially, everyone in Moscow knew exactly who used it. Inside the compound, security operated on routine mode. Motion sensors armed, radar and passive scan. Air defense units on standby but relaxed. No alerts, no warnings, no reason to believe anything was about to happen. Then the perimeter sensors registered something unusual. Not an aircraft, not a missile, not even fast. A cluster of contacts appeared at treetop level, moving at barely 90 kilometers per hour. Too slow for cruise missiles, too small for aircraft. Their radar signature was almost nothing at all. At first, the system dismissed them as birds. That mistake lasted exactly 6 seconds, because birds don't fly in perfectly spaced formations. Birds don't maintain altitude within a 2-meter margin, and birds don't approach a protected government compound from multiple vectors at the same time. By the time Russian air defense operators realized what they were seeing, the drones were already inside the outer exclusion zone. This was not a reconnaissance flight. This was a strike. The drones were Ukrainian-made long-range attack UAVs, modified for stealth and range. Lightweight composite frames, minimal metal content, electric motors tuned to reduce acoustic signature. They had crossed hundreds of kilometers of Russian airspace without triggering a single high-level alert. And now, they were less than 90 seconds from impact. The estate's short-range air defense system came online immediately. Radar switched from passive to active scan. Tracking beams snapped onto the incoming targets. Operators began sorting contacts, prioritizing the largest signatures first. That was exactly what the Ukrainians expected, because the drones weren't identical. The first wave consisted of decoys, cheap frames, inflated radar profiles, designed to die loudly. As Russian systems locked onto them, surface-to-air missiles launched upward in streaks of fire, exploding harmlessly above the trees. The defense crew reported successful intercepts. They were wrong. While the air defense radar focused upward, the real drones stayed low, skimming just meters above the ground, using terrain masking. Flying beneath the radar's effective engagement envelope, they crossed the final perimeter fence undetected. Inside the compound, security cameras caught the first visual contact, small dark shapes moving between buildings, almost silent, almost invisible. And then, the jamming began. Electronic interference flooded local frequencies. Camera feeds glitched. Motion sensors dropped offline one by one. Secure radios filled with static. The Ukrainians weren't just attacking the estate. They were attacking its nervous system. This wasn't improvisation. This was planning. At 2:43, the lead strike drone climbed sharply, just long enough to clear the tree canopy, just long enough to acquire its target, the guest house itself. A reinforced structure, concrete walls, hardened windows, designed to protect VIPs from protests, not precision attacks. The drone's guidance system locked in using preloaded satellite imagery, terrain reference matching, and optical confirmation. The final approach lasted less than 4 seconds. Then, the drone dove. The explosion wasn't massive, but it didn't need to be. The warhead was shaped for penetration, not spectacle. It punched through the roof and detonated inside, blowing out windows and collapsing part of the upper floor. A second drone followed almost immediately, then a third. Each impact walked the blast pattern across the structure with surgical precision. Not random, not panic-driven. Each strike targeted a different section of the building. Electrical systems failed instantly. Emergency lights flickered on, casting the compound in harsh red illumination. Smoke poured from the damaged roof. Fire suppression systems triggered too late to stop the initial damage. Inside the guest house, alarms screamed, but there was no one inside. And that's the detail that matters most, because this wasn't an assassination attempt. It was a message. Within minutes, Russian emergency services flooded the area. Fire crews, medical teams, security forces, roads sealed, communications locked down, cell signals jammed. State media was silent, But satellites weren't. Commercial imaging satellites captured the aftermath before dawn: a scorched roof, collapsed interior sections, burn marks tracing the drone approach paths. Analysts around the world began comparing images, measuring blast patterns, mapping entry angles. The conclusions were immediate and uncomfortable. Ukraine had just demonstrated the ability to strike a high-security government site deep inside Russia with precision. And it wasn't a lucky hit. The drones had avoided layered air defenses. They had exploited radar blind zones. They had used electronic warfare to degrade local response. They had coordinated timing, altitude, and vector like a professional strike package. This was not a symbolic attack, it was a systems test. Inside Russian command centers, analysts replayed the event frame by frame. How did the drones get through? Why weren't they detected earlier? Why did the decoys work so effectively? The answers were worse than the damage itself. The air defense systems had done exactly what they were designed to do. They just weren't designed for this. Traditional air defense is built to stop fast, high-altitude threats: jets, missiles, bombers. Not slow, quiet, low-flying drones using civilian-grade components and military-grade tactics. And Ukraine had just proven that Russia's interior defenses were vulnerable. Even more troubling was what wasn't hit. The drones avoided nearby administrative buildings. They avoided utility infrastructure. They avoided residential quarters for staff. They hit one structure, deliberately. That restraint sent a clearer signal than total destruction ever could. It said, "We can reach you. We can choose where to strike, and we can choose when to stop." Within hours, Russian officials downplayed the incident. A minor fire, no casualties. Air defenses functioned effectively. But internally, the reaction was anything but calm. Because this wasn't just about one guest house. If Ukraine could hit this site, it could hit others: residences, command centers, transportation hubs, and all without using missiles. That changes everything. For Ukraine, the operation achieved multiple objectives at once. It embarrassed Russian defenses. It forced redeployment of air defense assets inward, away from the front lines. It proved long-range strike capability without escalation to strategic weapons. And it did something else. It forced uncertainty, because now every protected site inside Russia had to ask the same question: are we really protected? And uncertainty is a weapon. In the days that followed, Russian air defense activity surged around Moscow and key regions. Additional systems deployed, patrols increased, radar coverage expanded. But defenses stretched thin are defenses under stress. Every system moved to protect the interior is one less system defending the battlefield. Ukraine understood that. This strike wasn't about destroying a building. It was about reshaping the battlefield without firing a single missile. No pilots at risk, no escalation threshold crossed, just drones, precision, and timing. And perhaps most importantly, plausibility. Drones can be denied, ambiguity maintained, messages sent without declarations. The guest house would be repaired, the damage covered, the story buried. But the lesson couldn't be erased. Because somewhere in Russia, another radar operator would look at a quiet screen, see nothing, hear nothing, and wonder if that silence meant safety, or if something very small, very quiet, and very deliberate was already on its way. So the question isn't whether this attack mattered. The question is how many more times it can happen before the defenses adapt, and whether adaptation will come fast enough. Because the night Ukraine struck Putin's guest house, they didn't just hit a building. They hit the assumption that distance equals safety, and that assumption is now gone.